The sun was setting over the sprawling Reynolds estate, casting long, mournful shadows across the immaculately kept gardens. Inside his mahogany-paneled office, Garrett Reynolds stared absently at financial reports that no longer seemed to matter. 2 weeks had passed since he'd buried his daughter, Charlotte. But the world around him still felt unreal. As if he were moving through a thick, suffocating fog. The silence in the mansion was deafening. His staff had been given time off. All except for Mrs. Peterson, the devoted housekeeper, who insisted on staying to keep things running. Even William, his loyal butler of 15 years, had been persuaded to visit his sister in Vermont. Garrett preferred it this way. The emptiness of the house finally matched the cavern in his heart. The sudden chime of the doorbell startled him. A sharp intrusion into his cocoon of grief. Garrett glanced at his watch, 7:43 p.m. Who would come unannounced at this hour? With a heavy sigh, he pushed himself away from his desk. Without William present, he'd have to answer it himself. The grand foyer echoed with his solitary footsteps as he approached the massive oak door. When he pulled it open, the evening breeze carried in the damp scent of approaching rain. And standing there, barely reaching his waist, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. With untamed golden curls and large, expressive eyes that stared up at him with a profound familiarity. In her arms, she clutched a worn stuffed rabbit, its fabric thin from years of loving. "I've never felt so homesick before," she said simply, her voice small but clear in the evening air. Garrett's world tilted. The floor beneath him seemed to shift, and he had to grip the door frame to steady himself. Those eyes, that face, the particular way her nose crinkled when she spoke. It was impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. She was the mirror image of Charlotte. "Are you okay, mister?" the little girl asked, taking a half-step back. Suddenly uncertain, Garrett struggled to find his voice, his throat tight. Who are you? Where are your parents?" "I'm Ellie," she replied, hugging her stuffed rabbit tighter. "I don't know where they are. I'm hungry. Can I come in?" A million questions raced through Garrett's mind. How had she gotten past the security gate? Where had she come from? And most importantly, how could she look so exactly like his daughter that it made his heart physically ache? "I shouldn't be talking to strangers," Ellie continued, filling his shocked silence. "But you don't feel like a stranger. Does that make sense?" It didn't. None of this made any sense. But Garrett found himself stepping aside, allowing this ghost-like apparition into his home. "Are you hungry, Ellie?" he managed to ask, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, following him with the confident steps of someone who belonged there. And as thunder rumbled in the distance, Garrett Reynolds, billionaire CEO and grieving father, closed the door on the approaching storm, unaware that his life had just changed forever. Mrs. Peterson's eyes widened when she spotted Ellie sitting at the kitchen island, swinging her legs as she devoured a sandwich. The housekeeper's gaze darted to Garrett, a silent, urgent question hanging between them. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Ellie. She'll be staying with us tonight," Garrett said, his voice steadier than he felt. Would you mind preparing the blue guest room? The older woman hesitated. Her eyes fixed on the child's face. Of course. Mr. Reynolds. She finally replied. Her voice carefully controlled. Though perhaps the blue room isn't the best choice. It gets rather drafty. Garrett understood her unspoken meaning. The blue room was adjacent to Charlotte's bedroom. A room he hadn't been able to enter since the funeral. While Mrs. Peterson busied herself upstairs, Garrett sat across from Ellie, watching her eat. Each gesture, each mannerism was hauntingly familiar. The way she cut her sandwich into triangles before eating. How she wrinkled her nose slightly when taking a bite. These weren't just similarities. They were exact replications of Charlotte's behaviors. Where did you come from, Ellie? He asked gently. From the Millers, she said between bites. They weren't very nice. Your adoptive parents? When she nodded, he continued. And how did you get here? To this house? Ellie shrugged. I just knew where to go. A chill ran down Garrett's spine. Should we call the police? They could help find your family. Please don't. She whispered. Her eyes suddenly terrified. They'll just send me back. Or worse. Later that night, as rain lashed against the windows, Garrett sat in his study with a glass of whiskey. Lost in memories. 5 years ago. Everything had been perfect, Rebecca's laughter filling their home. Charlotte taking her first steps across this very room. His company thriving beyond his wildest dreams. Then came the arguments with Rebecca. Her increasing paranoia about Charlotte's safety. The therapy sessions that didn't seem to help. And finally, 2 weeks ago, the call that shattered his world. A car accident on Lakeside Drive. Charlotte gone instantly. Rebecca, inconsolable, leaving for her sister's home in Europe. Unable to remain in a house filled with so many memories. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Mr. Reynolds. Mrs. Peterson stood in the doorway. The child. She refused to sleep in the guest room. I found her. In Charlotte's bed. Her voice broke slightly. Should I move her? Garrett closed his eyes, feeling the weight of grief press down on him again. No. He finally said. Let her sleep where she's comfortable. Later. He found himself standing outside Charlotte's room. The door slightly ajar. Inside, Ellie slept peacefully, curled around her stuffed rabbit. Bathed in the moonlight filtering through the curtains, Charlotte had picked herself. Who are you? He whispered to the sleeping child who wore his daughter's face. What am I supposed to do with you? As if sensing his presence, Ellie stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep. I'm home now. Tomorrow. He told himself. Tomorrow I'll call the authorities and do the right thing. But tonight. Just for tonight. He would allow himself this impossible comfort. The illusion that death had somehow given back what it had taken. Morning sunlight streamed through the bay windows of the dining room as Garrett watched Ellie meticulously arrange her pancakes. The chocolate chips forming a smiley face. Just as Charlotte had always done. He hadn't instructed Mrs. Peterson to prepare them this way. Somehow. Ellie had known to ask. Did you sleep well? Garrett asked, attempting to maintain some semblance of normalcy. The stars on the ceiling glow really bright. Ellie replied. Drizzling maple syrup in a spiral pattern. I counted all 37 of them. Garrett nearly choked on his coffee. The glow-in-the-dark constellation on Charlotte's ceiling had been their special project. Exactly 37 stars. Arranged to match the Big Dipper and surrounding stars as seen from their summer cabin in Maine. Ellie. He began carefully. Can you tell me more about the Millers? The people who took care of you. Her small shoulders tensed. They weren't nice. They only wanted the money. What money? The money people gave them for keeping me. She stabbed at a chocolate chip with her fork. They had other kids. Too. Sometimes. Kids that didn't belong to them. A cold feeling settled in Garrett's stomach. The implications were disturbing. Did they hurt you? He asked. Keeping his voice gentle despite the anger building inside him. Ellie shook her head. Not really. They just forgot about me a lot. Sometimes there wasn't food. Her expression brightened suddenly. Can we go to the secret place today? What secret place? Behind the bookshelf in the library. Where the toy train is hidden. Garrett felt the room spin slightly. Charlotte's hiding spot. A small alcove behind a false panel in the library bookcase. Had been their secret. Even Rebecca didn't know about the vintage toy train set he'd stashed there for Charlotte's upcoming birthday. A birthday she never lived to see. How do you know about that? He whispered. Ellie shrugged. Her expression innocent. I just know. Like I knew how to find this house. The front door opened with the familiar sound of keys jingling. William had returned. The butler's footsteps echoed through the foyer. Then stopped abruptly as he entered the dining room and saw Ellie. Good heavens. He breathed. His usually impassive face a mask of shock. William. This is Ellie. Garrett said. She'll be staying with us for a while. The butler recovered quickly. Slipping back into his professional demeanor. Very good. Sir. Shall I prepare the guest room? That won't be necessary. She's using Charlotte's room. Later. While Ellie explored the garden under Mrs. Peterson's watchful eye. William cornered Garrett in his study. Sir. Forgive my directness. But who is this child? The resemblance is uncanny. I don't know. William. She showed up last night. Alone. Have you contacted the authorities? Surely someone is looking for her. Garrett turned to the window. Watching Ellie carefully examining a butterfly that had landed on a rose bush, Charlotte's favorite spot in the garden. I will. Tomorrow. William's reflection in the window showed his concerned frown. Mr. Reynolds. With all due respect. This isn't healthy. The grief counselor warned about seeking substitutes. She knew about the train. William. Garrett interrupted. The one in the hiding place. No one knew about that except Charlotte and me. Later that afternoon. Ellie led Garrett directly to the hidden panel in the library. Without hesitation. Her small fingers found the concealed latch that had taken him days to install so that it would be invisible to the casual observer. How? Garrett asked as the panel swung open, revealing the untouched train set. How did you know? Ellie looked up at him. Her eyes, Charlotte's eyes, filled with a wisdom no 7-year-old should possess. I just knew. She said simply. Like I know you're sad. But not as sad as yesterday. A deeper mystery. The ticking of the grandfather clock was the only sound in Garrett's study as he stared at the adoption papers spread across his desk. Across from him sat Marcus Doyle, an ex-homicide detective whose son Garrett had once helped clear of fraud charges. His weathered face was grave. "These documents are forgeries," Marcus said, tapping a finger on the papers. "Good ones. But definitely fake. The seal is wrong. And the judge who supposedly signed off on this retired 2 years before the date on these papers." Garrett rubbed his temples. "What about the Millers? James and Teresa Miller. They've moved around a lot. 5 states in 7 years. Always living just below the radar. I've got a contact at Child Protective Services looking into them. But my gut says they're involved in something ugly." A soft knock interrupted them. Mrs. Peterson stood in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Sir. The child is asking for her bedtime story. I offered to read to her. But she's quite insistent that it should be you." Garrett nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. I'll be right there." Turning back to Marcus, he added, "Keep digging. I need to know where she came from." In Charlotte's bedroom, Ellie sat cross-legged on the bed, already in pajamas that Mrs. Peterson had purchased that afternoon. Her stuffed rabbit lay beside her, looking oddly at home among Charlotte's toys. "Mrs. Peterson says you tell the best stories," Ellie said, scooting over to make room. Garrett sat on the edge of the bed, reaching automatically for the secret garden. Charlotte's favorite. "This one?" Ellie nodded enthusiastically. "The part where Mary finds the key. Please." He opened the book to the exact chapter, the worn spine falling open naturally to the page Charlotte had requested night after night. As he read, Ellie mouthed certain passages along with him, her eyes half closed in contentment. When the chapter ended, Ellie yawned and snuggled deeper under the covers. "Can you sing the song now?" "What song?" Garrett asked, though a part of him already knew. "The one about the moon watching over me when I sleep. The one Mom always sang." Garrett's throat tightened. Rebecca had composed that lullaby herself for Charlotte, with lyrics about moonbeams and guardian stars. No one else knew it. Not even Mrs. Peterson or William. "How do you know about that song, Ellie?" Her eyelids were growing heavy. "My mom used to sing it to me in my dreams. When I was scared at the Millers, I could hear her singing it." After Ellie had fallen asleep, Garrett returned to his study where Marcus was examining photographs. "Found these in her backpack," Marcus said, passing a small envelope to Garrett. "Baby pictures. Mostly." The photos were worn and creased Ellie as an infant, as a toddler. In one image, a hospital bracelet was partially visible around her tiny wrist. Garrett squinted at the blurry ID code. "Can we enhance this?" "Already sent it to my tech guy. Should hear back tomorrow." Marcus gathered his notes. "There's one more thing. The Millers didn't just have Ellie. According to my CPS contact, at least 7 children have passed through their home in the last decade. All with questionable paperwork. Human trafficking. Possibly. Or something even more targeted." Marcus hesitated. "Garrett. I have to ask. When did you and Rebecca learn that Charlotte had died? 2 weeks ago. The police came to the door around midnight. There had been an accident. His voice faltered. Why? Because according to my preliminary timeline, Ellie left the Millers 3 days after Charlotte's accident. Almost as if. Marcus trailed off. As if what? As if she somehow knew she needed to find you. That night, Garrett couldn't sleep. He kept returning to Ellie's room. Watching her breathe. Studying her face in the moonlight. The resemblance wasn't just physical. It was in her mannerisms. Her preferences. Her knowledge of things only Charlotte should know. Tomorrow. He promised himself again. Tomorrow I'll call the authorities. But as dawn approached, Garrett knew he was lying to himself. Something inexplicable was happening. And until he understood what it was, Ellie would remain under his protection. The fever and the truth. Garrett was reviewing quarterly projections on his tablet when he heard the crash from upstairs. Followed by Mrs. Peterson's alarmed call. Mr. Reynolds. Come quickly. He took the stairs 2 at a time. Heart pounding. In the hallway outside Charlotte's room, he found Mrs. Peterson kneeling beside Ellie, who lay crumpled on the floor. Her face was flushed. Golden curls plastered to her forehead with sweat. She was fine 1 minute. Then just collapsed. Mrs. Peterson explained. Her voice trembling. She's burning with fever. Garrett gathered Ellie into his arms. Alarmed at the heat radiating from her small body. Call Dr. Bennett. He instructed. Tell him it's an emergency. 20 minutes later. Dr. Bennett, who had been the Reynolds family physician for over a decade, was examining Ellie in Charlotte's bed. His face remained professionally neutral. But Garrett didn't miss the momentary shock when he'd first seen the child. 104 degrees. Dr. Bennett announced. Reading the thermometer. Quite high. How long has she been ill? She was fine at breakfast. Garrett replied. Anxiety tightening his chest. This came on suddenly. Dr. Bennett frowned. Listening to Ellie's lungs with his stethoscope. Her breathing is slightly labored. Could be a severe viral infection or early pneumonia. He glanced up at Garrett. She should really be in a hospital. Garrett. No hospitals. Garrett said firmly. Whatever she needs. We'll handle it here. The doctor's eyebrows rose. But he continued his examination. I'm going to need to check for rashes. Could you help me turn her? As they gently rolled Ellie onto her side, the collar of her pajama top slipped, revealing her shoulder. Dr. Bennett froze, staring at a small, star-shaped birthmark. Is that? He didn't finish the question. But his eyes met Garrett's. Yes. Garrett confirmed quietly. Identical to Charlotte's. Dr. Bennett's professional composure faltered. He had delivered Charlotte. Had been her doctor since birth. He knew the significance of what he was seeing. Garrett. He said carefully. I don't want to overstep. But I have to ask. Who is this child? Her name is Ellie. She showed up at my door 3 nights ago. Garrett ran a hand through his hair. I know how it looks. James. I know what you're thinking, that grief has made me see similarities that aren't there. But it's more than that. She knows things. Things only Charlotte could know. Dar. Bennett prepared an injection of antibiotics. Childhood leukemia can present with sudden high fevers, he said, seemingly changing the subject. When Charlotte was 4, we tested her because of recurring infections. Remember? Garrett nodded. The memory's still painful. 3 days of waiting for results. Worst days of my life. Until the accident. The relief when those tests came back negative was palpable. But during those tests, we collected comprehensive genetic data. Dar. Bennett administered the injection with practiced ease. I still have those samples. Garrett. If you wanted to compare. Their eyes met in silent understanding. Do it. Garrett whispered. Later that evening, Ellie's fever began to break. She drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally mumbling words that made no sense. Garrett remained by her bedside, sponging her forehead with cool water the way he had done when Charlotte had been ill. His phone vibrated with an incoming text from Marcus. Found something. The Millers were arrested 6 months ago in Arizona. Charges include child endangerment and trafficking. Several children recovered. But records are inconsistent. Continuing to investigate. Garrett stared at the message. A cold dread settling in his stomach. What kind of people had Ellie been living with? And how many other children had suffered at their hands? Ellie stirred. Her eyes fluttering open. For a moment they were unfocused. Then they found Garrett's face. Daddy. She whispered. Before slipping back into sleep. Garrett sat perfectly still. The word echoing in his mind. Not Mr. or Mr. Reynolds. But Daddy. Spoken with such natural familiarity that it broke something open inside him. I'm here. He whispered back. Though she couldn't hear him. I'm right here. Rebecca's return. The crunch of tires on gravel announced Rebecca's arrival. Garrett stood in the foyer. A tumult of emotions churning within him, anger. Confusion. Hope. Betrayal. Through the leaded glass panels flanking the front door, he watched as his wife emerged from the taxi. Her once vibrant presence now subdued. 2 weeks in Europe had done little to ease the grief etched into her face. William opened the door. His professional demeanor betraying nothing of the household's turmoil. Welcome home, Mrs. Reynolds. Rebecca stepped inside. Her eyes immediately finding Garrett's. For a moment they stood in silence. The weight of unspoken accusations and secrets pressing down between them. Where is she? Rebecca asked quietly. Garrett stiffened. How did you know? Your text said we needed to talk. I assumed it was about. She hesitated. About Charlotte. But your face tells me there's something else. Her gaze sharpened. What's happened? Garrett? Before he could answer, the patter of small feet on the marble floor drew their attention. Ellie appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Still in her pajamas despite the late morning hour. She froze when she saw Rebecca. Her small hand gripping the banister. Rebecca swayed slightly. Her face draining of color. William stepped forward instinctively, ready to catch her if she fainted. My God. She whispered. Her voice barely audible. Ellie descended the stairs slowly. her eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. When she reached the bottom, she stood before them, unusually solemn. "You're the woman from my dreams," Ellie said simply. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth, stifling what might have been a sob. Without another word, she turned and rushed toward the sitting room. Garrett nodded to Mrs. Peterson, who had appeared in the hallway, silently asking her to look after Ellie. He found Rebecca standing by the window, arms wrapped tightly around herself as if holding something in, or keeping something out. "How could you?" she demanded, her back still to him. "How could you bring a child that looks like her into our home? Do you have any idea how cruel that is?" "Rebecca," Garrett said carefully, "I didn't seek her out. She appeared at our door. And there's more to this than. I don't want to hear it." Rebecca spun to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Our daughter is gone, Garrett. Finding a look-alike won't bring her back. She's not just a look-alike." Garrett's voice was low, controlled. "She knows things, Rebecca. Things only Charlotte would know. She found your journal hidden under the floorboard. She knows the lullaby you wrote. She recognized your music box and can hum the second half of its melody. A melody I've never heard." Rebecca paled further. That's not possible." Dar. Bennett ran a DNA test. "We're still waiting for the results." But he found the same star-shaped birthmark on her shoulder. The exact same mark Charlotte had. Coincidence? Rebecca whispered. But her voice lacked conviction. Marcus discovered there was an investigation at the hospital when Charlotte was born. Garrett took a step closer. "Something about irregularities in the maternity ward. You were contacted about it. But you kept it from me. Why?" Rebecca's composure crumbled. She sank onto the sofa, her shoulders shaking. "You don't understand. You can't possibly understand." "Then help me understand," Garrett pleaded. "Because right now, all evidence points to Charlotte having a twin sister that you somehow knew about but never told me." "It wasn't like that," Rebecca whispered. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcus, who appeared at the doorway with a file in hand. "DNA results," he said grimly. "And there's something else. Rebecca has been making calls to Brookhaven Psychiatric Center for months, including 3 calls the week before Charlotte's accident." Rebecca's head snapped up, her eyes wide with alarm. "You've been investigating me?" "I've been investigating Ellie's origins," Marcus corrected. "Your name kept appearing in places I didn't expect." Garrett took the file, scanning the results with a racing heart. The clinical language couldn't obscure the stunning conclusion: 99.9% probability of identical genetic markers between Ellie's sample and Charlotte's archived medical records. "She's Charlotte's identical twin," Garrett said, his voice hollow with shock. "Our daughter. Our other daughter." He looked up at Rebecca, whose face had gone eerily calm. "Did you know? All this time? Did you know we had twins?" Rebecca stood, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. "I want that child out of this house by tonight. Call social services. Call whoever you need to. But she cannot stay here. Rebecca. I won't discuss this further. Not now." She headed for the door, then paused. "The funeral nearly destroyed me. Garrett. I won't survive losing her twice. As Rebecca disappeared up the stairs, Garrett and Marcus exchanged troubled glances. She's hiding something, Marcus said quietly. Something big. Find out what it is, Garrett replied, his gaze following his wife's retreat. Whatever it takes. The whole truth. Evening shadows lengthened across Garrett's study as he faced Rebecca across his desk. After hours of tense silence throughout the house, she had finally agreed to talk. Her hands were clasped tightly in her lap, knuckles white with tension. Start from the beginning, Garrett said, keeping his voice level despite the storm of emotions within. No more secrets. Rebecca drew a shaky breath. The delivery was complicated. Dar. Lawrence seemed tense. I was in so much pain. But before they gave me the sedative, I heard one of the nurses say something about 2 heartbeats. She looked up, meeting Garrett's eyes. When I woke up, you were there holding Charlotte. You looked so happy. But I kept asking about the second heartbeat. And everyone, the doctors, the nurses, they all denied it. Said I must have been confused from the medication. Why didn't you tell me? Garrett asked softly. I did. Don't you remember? You said the same thing they did, that it was just the drugs or my imagination. Hurt flashed in her eyes. After a while, I started to believe it myself. But I couldn't shake this feeling. This emptiness. So, you investigated on your own? Rebecca nodded. For years, I hired private investigators. I researched cases of hospital negligence. Eventually, I traced a nurse who had been present during the delivery. She agreed to meet me. But she was frightened. Said people were watching her. Did you meet her? I tried. The day before our appointment. She died in a car accident. Rebecca's voice cracked. The police ruled it an accident. But it felt convenient. Marcus, who had been silently taking notes in the corner, looked up sharply. What was her name? Nancy Winters. She worked in maternity for 20 years before suddenly resigning a month after Charlotte's birth. Marcus made a note. I'll look into it. Rebecca continued. After that, the hospital approached me about irregularities. They wanted to conduct DNA tests. But by then I was terrified. What if there had been another baby? Our baby. And something had happened to her. I couldn't bear the thought. And I didn't want you to suffer that knowledge. 2. Tears spilled down her cheeks. So I declined the investigation. I told myself that Charlotte was healthy and perfect, and that should be enough. I tried to move on. But you couldn't. Garrett said. Realization dawning. That's why you became so overprotective of Charlotte. Why you were always anxious. Rebecca nodded miserably. The thought that I might have lost a child. Or worse. That a child of mine might be out there somewhere. Alone. It haunted me. The therapists called it obsessive anxiety. And the calls to Brookhaven Psychiatric Center. Rebecca stiffened. I had a breakdown after finding Dr. Lawrence's name on a list of consulting physicians there. It seemed too coincidental. Rebecca. Garrett pressed gently. Please. The whole truth. She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. There's something you should know about Charlotte's accident. Garrett felt a chill. What about it? Rebecca's voice faltered. She turned to face him. Her expression a mask of grief and guilt. Charlotte didn't die in that accident. Garrett. The room seemed to tilt. What are you saying? She disappeared from the car. The accident was real. I swerved to avoid hitting a dog. But when help arrived, Charlotte wasn't in her car seat. She was just gone. Rebecca's voice broke. The police thought I was hysterical, confused from the impact. They searched everywhere, but there was no trace of her. You let me believe our daughter was dead, Garrett whispered, horror spreading through him. I had to. Rebecca cried. They were watching us. They said if I told anyone the truth, if I involved the police, they'd make sure both girls disappeared forever. Don't you see? Ellie showing up here. It's not a coincidence. It's a warning. They know we found her. And now they'll come for both of them. As if summoned by her words. The doorbell rang. Its chime echoing ominously through the silent house. William's footsteps echoed in the hallway. Mr. Reynolds, he announced. His normally composed face tense. There are representatives from Child Protective Services at the door. They have documentation regarding Miss Ellie. Garrett's eyes met Rebecca's. Hers wide with fear. His narrowing with suspicion. Did you call them? He demanded. No. Rebecca whispered fiercely. I swear. Garrett. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Torn away. In the foyer. Two professionally dressed women waited. The older one stepped forward, extending her hand. Mr. Reynolds. I'm Sandra Mercer from Child Protective Services. This is my colleague, Dana Willis. We're here regarding a child we believe is in your custody. Eleanora Miller. May I ask what this is about? Garrett's mind was racing. We've received information that you're harboring a child who was illegally removed from her foster placement. She handed him a document. This is a temporary custody order. We're authorized to return Eleanora to state care. There must be some mistake, Garrett said, scanning the paperwork. Ellie came to us on her own. Her previous guardians were arrested for child trafficking. MS. Mercer's expression remained neutral. That case is still under investigation. Mr. Reynolds. Meanwhile, you have no legal right to keep this child. Where is she? From the top of the stairs came Mrs. Peterson's voice, tight with concern. Mr. Reynolds. Miss Ellie is asking what's happening. All eyes turned upward, where Ellie stood beside the housekeeper, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Her eyes widened at the sight of the visitors. Please, she whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Don't let them take me. What followed was a blur of bureaucratic inevitability. Despite Garrett's protests and his promises to seek emergency foster certification, the outcome was predetermined. I'll get her things, Mrs. Peterson said, her voice breaking. Just her rabbit. MS. Willis replied coolly. State-provided clothing will be issued. Rebecca remained eerily quiet throughout, standing apart. When Garrett caught her eye, silently pleading for support, she looked away. As Ellie was led toward the door, Garrett knelt before her. "Listen to me," he said urgently, his hands on her small shoulders. "This is temporary. I'm going to fight for you. I promise I will find a way to bring you home." "I know," Ellie whispered with that strange certainty. Then her voice rose with sudden panic as Ms. Mercer took her hand. "Don't let them take me again." The word again hung in the air like a thunderclap. As they led her out, something slipped from a worn seam in her rabbit, a small, tarnished locket. It fell to the marble floor with a tiny clink that somehow echoed louder than all the adult voices combined. Rebecca gasped, stepping forward instinctively. "That's..." Garrett retrieved the locket. He'd given it to Rebecca on their first anniversary. Years later, she had placed a picture of newborn Charlotte inside. She'd worn it constantly until the chain broke 3 years ago. Ellie looked back from the doorway, her eyes meeting Garrett's with an impossible, ancient wisdom. "I've always had it," she said simply. After the CPS workers had driven away with Ellie, Garrett stood in the driveway, the locket clutched in his fist. When he finally turned back, he found Rebecca in the doorway, her face ashen. "That locket," she whispered. "I put it in Charlotte's jewelry box the day before the accident. It was the original photo. Our wedding day. I'd had it repaired as a surprise." "How did Ellie have it?" Before Garrett could respond, Marcus appeared behind Rebecca, his expression grim. "We need to talk. Now. I found something about Dr. Lawrence. And it connects directly to Rebecca. The Gemini Initiative." The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp that cast long shadows across their grim faces. "These are surveillance photos from Brookhaven Psychiatric Center," Marcus explained, pointing to images of Rebecca meeting with Dr. Lawrence. "You said you never met with him," Garrett said quietly. "I had to." Rebecca's hands trembled. "He was the only one who knew the truth." "Which is what?" "Exactly. Our daughter is in state custody while you drip-feed me half-truths." "Enough. Rebecca. All of it. Now." She took a shuddering breath. "After Charlotte's disappearance, I received an anonymous call. They said they had both our daughters. And if I went to the police, they'd disappear forever. They instructed me to report Charlotte as dead." "Why would you agree?" "Because they sent me this." Rebecca pulled a photo from her purse. Charlotte, taken after the accident, holding a current newspaper. "Proof of life. They said as long as I cooperated, both girls would remain safe." "Both girls?" "They claimed they had Ellie, too, though they never sent proof. I didn't even know her name until you told me." "And Dr. Lawrence?" Marcus asked. "He orchestrated everything." Rebecca's expression hardened. The pregnancies at Riverside Memorial were part of an unofficial study on genetic predisposition in identical twins. He was stealing babies. "For what?" Garrett whispered. "Horror dawning. Research and profit." Marcus added grimly. "I found financial records showing payments from a company called Gemini Futures to Dr. Lawrence. It was a research protocol called the Gemini Initiative. Twins separated at birth, raised in controlled environments to test nature versus nurture theories. The Millers," Garrett said, pieces falling into place. They were part of this experiment. Not just that. Marcus said. The twins were monitored for paranormal connectivity, shared dreams, intuitive knowledge. Rebecca nodded, a tear sliding down her cheek. Charlotte started having dreams about her mirror friend when she was 4. I thought it was an imaginary friend. But she knew things. Things she couldn't possibly know. The same way Ellie knew about the hiding place. The locket. The music box. Garrett whispered. Marcus gathered the documents. I've contacted a judge. He's reviewing our evidence for an emergency custody hearing for Ellie and issuing search warrants for Brookhaven and Dr. Lawrence's private residence. Charlotte. Garrett said, standing suddenly. If she's alive. Where is she now? Dr. Lawrence has a property in the mountains. Rebecca said. A desperate hope in her eyes. A research retreat. That's where the photo was taken. Do you know where it is? Marcus asked sharply. Lake Evergreen. About 3 hours north of here. Garrett was already reaching for his coat. Call the judge back. Tell him we need those warrants now. And contact the state police. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca caught his arm. There's one more thing. According to Dr. Lawrence's notes, the connection between the twins strengthens with proximity. If we find Charlotte, Garrett finished, a spark of hope igniting within him, we might be able to use that connection to find Ellie. 2. Let's go bring our daughters home. The raid. A convoy of unmarked police vehicles wound its way up the narrow mountain road leading to Lake Evergreen. In the lead car, Garrett sat tensely beside Detective Sarah Chen. The property came into view as they rounded a bend, a sprawling cedar and stone lodge nestled among tall pines. As the vehicles pulled into the driveway, a man appeared. The same steel-rimmed glasses and clinical demeanor from the photographs. Dr. Alan Lawrence. Dr. Lawrence. I'm Detective Chen. She said. Warrant in hand. We have a warrant to search these premises. This is a private research facility. He said coolly. I must insist on speaking with my attorney. That's not how warrants work. Doctor. Chen replied. We're coming in now. As officers began to approach, a flash of movement caught Garrett's eye, a child's face in an upper window. Quickly pulled back from view. His heart lurched. Charlotte. He whispered. Ignoring Chen's shout of protest, Garrett sprinted toward the building. He burst through the front door and headed for the staircase. The upper hallway branched in 2 directions. He heard a small sound from the left. At the end of the hall was a door with a small brass lock installed on the outside. His blood ran cold. Charlotte. He called softly. Charlotte. Are you in there? Silence. Then a small voice. Who's there? The voice, so achingly familiar, sent a jolt through Garrett. With trembling hands, he slid open the lock. The room beyond was a comfortable prison, a child's bedroom with barred windows. And there, standing beside a small desk, was a golden-haired little girl. She was thinner than he remembered. But her eyes were the same. Charlotte's eyes. Ellie's eyes. Daddy? She whispered. Uncertainty in her voice. Garrett fell to his knees, opening his arms. She hesitated for just a moment. then ran to him. Her small body colliding with his in an embrace that shattered and rebuilt his world in a single instant. "I knew you'd come," she whispered. "Ellie said you would." From the doorway came a strangled sob. Rebecca stood there, her entire body trembling. "Charlotte." The little girl broke from Garrett's embrace to run to her mother. "Mom." As the family reunited, Detective Chin appeared. "Mr. Reynolds. We found documents. Lots of them. And there are other children here, 5 of them. Dr. Lawrence is in custody. But there's something else. According to the staff, he has a partner. Someone who financed the entire operation. We're still trying to identify them." Garrett looked at Charlotte, now wrapped in Rebecca's arms. "We need to find Ellie now." Charlotte looked up. "I can help," she said with quiet certainty. "I always know where Ellie is." A miraculous reunion. In the administrative office of the Brightwood Children's Center, Director Amelia Carter reviewed the emergency custody order. "This is highly unusual," she said to the judge. In the hallway, Garrett waited with Rebecca and Charlotte. "Will she remember me?" Charlotte whispered. "She'll remember," Garrett assured her. They were led to a small meeting room. A social worker entered, leading Ellie by the hand. The little girl's eyes widened, her gaze moving from Garrett to Rebecca before landing on Charlotte. For a breathless moment, the twins stared at each other. Mirror images separated by mere feet instead of miles. "You're real," Ellie whispered, her voice filled with wonder. "I told you I'd wait for you," Charlotte replied. Something passed between them. An unspoken understanding. Then, as if choreographed, they ran to each other, colliding in a fierce embrace that seemed to release years of separation and longing. Garrett and Rebecca watched, transfixed, as the twins held each other, speaking in half-sentences, completing each other's thoughts, laughing at private jokes. It was as if they had never been apart. When they finally separated, Charlotte turned to her parents. "Ellie knows things," she said urgently. "About Dr. Lawrence. About the others." Ellie nodded solemnly. "There are more of us. More twins. Some of them are still hidden." Over the next hour, Ellie shared details that left the adults stunned: names, locations, the entire structure of Dr. Lawrence's operation. "The bad doctor said we were special," Ellie explained. "That our connection was stronger than the other twins. He wanted to study us longer. But then Charlotte found out too much." "Found out what?" Garrett asked gently. "About me," Ellie said simply. She saw a file on Dr. Lawrence's desk. It had my picture in it. That's when she started looking for me in her dreams on purpose. By evening, Judge Harmon had issued a temporary custody order, placing Ellie with the Reynolds family. As they left Brightwood, the twins walked hand in hand. In the car, they sat pressed against each other, as if afraid that any separation might become permanent. "Are we really going home?" Ellie asked, her voice small but hopeful. "All of us together?" "Yes," Garrett promised, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. "We're all going home. A family. Whole again." 1 year later. Golden afternoon light bathed the gardens of the Reynolds estate. Garrett stood before a small gathering of their closest friends and family as Rebecca walked toward him. A simple ivory dress accentuating the newfound peace in her eyes. Behind her came Charlotte and Ellie. Identical in lavender dresses. Their steps moving in perfect synchrony. "We gather today," the officiant began. "Not just to witness Garrett and Rebecca renew their vows, but to celebrate the reunification of a family that refused to be broken." Later, as guests mingled, the twins slipped away to the koi pond. From the terrace, Garrett watched his daughters, still marveling at the profound, unspoken bond between them. The past year had been one of healing and justice. Lawrence awaited trial, and his network of wealthy, powerful backers, the so-called Gemini Futures, was being dismantled by federal investigators. 3 other sets of twins had been reunited with their families, with more cases pending. That afternoon, the family drove to Oakwood Cemetery, where a small headstone had once marked Charlotte's supposed burial. They stood before a new stone, carved with the words, "For the lost who are found and those still searching. May all journeys lead to home." That evening, as Garrett tucked the twins into their beds, side by side in the expanded bedroom that had once been only Charlotte's, Ellie looked up at him. "Even when it was bad at the Millers," she said quietly, "I always felt like someone loved me. Even when I was alone, I never felt completely alone." "You were never alone," Charlotte confirmed from her bed. "I was always with you. I just didn't know how to find you." "But you did find me," Ellie said, smiling. "Through our dreams. And Daddy found us both," Charlotte added. As he turned out the light, Garrett paused in the doorway, watching as the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling began to shine, now numbering 74. One constellation for each twin. "Daddy," Charlotte called softly. "We're going to be okay now, aren't we?" "Yes," Garrett promised, his voice thick with emotion. "We're going to be more than okay." Downstairs, Rebecca waited for him on the terrace, gazing up at the real stars emerging in the twilight sky. He took her hand, feeling the solid weight of their new wedding bands, symbols of a love that had weathered the unimaginable and emerged stronger. The house that had once echoed with grief now hummed with the quiet, powerful miracle of a family made whole again. A testament to the fact that some bonds, no matter how far they are stretched, can never truly be broken. We hope this story of hope, mystery, and the unbreakable bond of family touched your heart. Miracles happen in the most unexpected ways. If you enjoyed this journey, please subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thank you for watching.